You know, and you're seeing it. I mean, we're seeing that malaise show up. It's actually hotter than that. And we're seeing anger in the town halls that Republicans are having. People are angry at everything from no due process for Kilmer Abrego Garcia. They're angry about DOJ. And, you know, to sort of David's point, I mean, this hasn't really hit yet. And it's gonna come in waves that'll hit people. You know, as they're rolling a cart through a retailer. I mean, I cannot stress enough, having worked in politics, how perilous this moment is when your messages, if they're not true and empathetic, which the Trump administration, I don't think if they were sitting here would ever claim to do well, tell the truth or be empathetic. Don't match people's lived realities. And I really feel like we're at this tectonic break in everything that's come before it, where there will be no lie, there will be no right-wing disinformation to spin the reality of things that people need becoming more expensive. Or if you're an Etsy small business, everything that you need to run your business or to embroider. I mean, the whole sort of supply chain and ripple effects of this are either misunderstood or being ignored by the entire Republican Party.
Well, you've also got people that are running the country who are isolated. You know, you talk about the lack of empathy. I don't think there is even a lack of understanding of how the average American lives. They are so isolated. They are so in that ivory, that marble tower that they live in, that they really don't understand the impact that this is going to have. And Donald Trump is somewhat isolated because he doesn't think he's going to have to run again if he's, you know, wearing these, having caps that are created that, you know, say 2028. Well, he thinks he would be elected by fiat in some way, but doesn't have to actually go out and make the case. The thing that is truly hard to understand in this moment is Congress.
Right.
I mean, you know, that's what just doesn't make sense to me here, is that they do live closer to the ground. And we see that when they go to the town halls. We see that when they return to their districts. They do understand how this is going to hit the average family. They do understand how this is already hitting farmers right now that are feeling an awful lot of pain. And yes, they may expect to get some sort of bailout like they did last time, but that's not a guarantee. And they're starting to feel the pain. And they do understand how precarious people are if they have someone in their family who's sick, because we haven't talked about the cost of health care and the uncertainties there, and the fact that the economy is essentially paralyzed. There are so many companies that cannot make a decision right now. They cannot make it. They should be right now making decisions about the third quarter and the first quarter of 2026. That's where we are. Everything is forecasted. Everything is, you know, the decisions about what's going to be on the shelves around Christmas. That should have already been made. They're holding their fire right now. They're holding their powder because there's so much chaos. And some of these things are understandable. So the de minimis rule, it maybe makes sense to do that because there were concerns about, you know, bad actors using that to send things into the country. But if you were going to do this, in most cases, you wouldn't see this kind of chaos. You would think about how you would do this. It would be beta tested. It would be pressure tested. You would figure out how to do this and how to get rid of all the kinks in the hose before you turn the spigot on full. They're not doing this. They seem perfectly fine with chaos. They almost seem to thrive on it, and they don't care. They just don't care about how it affects regular people. And they have, it's almost like an ADHD kind of thing. And I want to be careful because I don't want to impugn people who actually have ADHD. But in this case, they can't pay attention to one thing. They create a mess in run room. If you've ever, you know, if anybody who's as a parent, who's been a parent understands this, the kids make a mess in one room and they forget, oh, I was making cookies and I left flour all over the kitchen. Let me go in this room and, you know, and I'm going to make in this room. And they just sort of forget that they've made a mess in one place and have no intention of cleaning that up before they go in like a bunker bomb in the next sector of the economy and create, you know, problems someplace else, and not thinking about the collateral damage that they were creating.
And we excuse our children when they do that. But David Gura, I mean, to this point about who voters will turn to when this sits in, let me read you something my colleague Joe Scarborough wrote this morning. Quote, as Trump blames Biden for the shrinking economy, here's who really owns this crisis. The American people will feel the impact of Trump's tariffs, if they haven't already. When the next election comes around, the same Republicans who refuse to stand up to the president can't go on the campaign trail and point their finger at Trump. Those Republicans own this. The Republican senators who refused to join their colleagues on Wednesday own it. Republican House members who stood idly by as Trump wreaks havoc on the economy own it. I mean, my understanding, and covering Trump means Googling things that you just never thought you'd have to cover. So, I think one of the early days I was Googling Smoot Hall. You're Googling all these things that you haven't covered in a political atmosphere because no one's dumb enough to try it again because they're so historically catastrophic and devastating. You know about them from sort of a historical perspective. But one of the pieces that I wonder if Democrats have an opportunity to help explain is that Congress does have control over tariffs, and they could have stopped these. They still can.
Yeah, and you've seen some members of Congress on both sides of the aisle maybe having second thoughts about ceding a lot of that ground to the president. But you're right. For many years, that was the provenance of Congress, and it's gone away. I look at what we got today, which was a jobs report that looks pretty good. It was a good jobs report, and the White House took a victory lap. And here you have this kind of funny moment where all week the White House is saying, this is the Biden economy. We're dealing with the Biden economy and the Biden stock market.
Oh, wait, I have that. Let me play that. Here's that moment. Here's J.D. Vance.
So the first thing is, when you talk about the economy, this is Joe Biden's economy.
You probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump.
This is Biden's economy because we took over on January 20th.
This is Biden. And you can even say the next quarter is sort of Biden because it doesn't just happen on a daily or an hourly basis.
So again, to quote J.D. and Donald Trump, this is Biden's jobs report.
And that was as recently as just a few hours ago. And then this jobs report came out, and they're very happy to take credit for the fact that the jobs numbers were pretty good. But I think it encapsulates the moment we're in. That is a backward-looking number, and it doesn't capture what I think we've been talking about here for the last few minutes, which is sentiment, which is the sense that we all have about the economy. And that survey for those, that employment survey was taken right after Liberation Day, right before it was paused for 90 days. So it's not capturing, I think, the entirety of the anxiety that a lot of people have about this economy. And that sums up sort of the moment that we're at right now. And it's like the storm is on the horizon. We know from what Michelle was talking about.
But it isn't a storm. It is a man-made...
Cataclysmic. Right. Storm
right?
It's not a natural disaster,
A storm is a natural occurrence.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is where I think it's so important, I think, to always explain it what it is. This is not a storm. This is not a pandemic. This was Trump's man-made, hissy-fit, personal obsession with tariffs.
So the calamity is coming into clearer focus. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. And I think that what we heard from Michelle there a moment ago, talking about how companies can't forecast or they're pulling forecasts. I said it was out of the ordinary that we had all of these companies warning about the fact that prices were going up. It is crazy how many companies have said, we're not going to give a forecast going forward. We're going to revise it or not even do it. And then you have consumers who are worried as well. So that worry isn't captured in these numbers today. And I think that, again, going back to what you just played and this kind of silly debate about who owns the economy, he's been president for more than 100 days. We're looking at the real implication of policies that he's put in place. And it is going to be more and more difficult, I think, to look backward and say this is any sort of vestige of what happened in the past. So much, as you're rightly pointing out, the path has been altered fundamentally here by the president and the White House.